Hey guys, today we're going to flick through a groundbreaking PC magazine called PC PowerPlay. Why was it groundbreaking? Well, in the mid-90s, there wasn't really a dedicated Australian PC gaming magazine. Sure, all of the imports were available. They didn't cater to the simple questions, like how much a game would cost, and when would it actually be released. Yeah, so this was pre-mainstream internet, so this was a vital source of PC gaming information. It's also a bit of a time capsule because PC PowerPlay came with a demo CD, which contained a bunch of goodies. Not only shareware titles, but patches and utilities scoured off the net. This is issue number 2, which came out in May 1996. Let's take a look. There's a Mark Hamill interview as well, so that should be interesting. Alrighty. So just looking at our opening page, we've got a pretty cool ad for Settlers 2. I believe it was, I don't know if it was turn-based. I've never actually played it, but yeah, there are a lot of games around this era that were like turn-based or real-time sort of management games. And I didn't get into the Settlers 2 series, but perhaps that's one to look out for in the future. On the flip side page, we've got an ad for Afterlife, and again in the realm of management games, this was sort of like, I mean, the best way you could describe it was sort of SimCity, but you sort of dealt with, well, the afterlife as a topic. So you had heaven and hell, and you had to sort of manage souls as they came in, track them, and obviously make money and so on. But we'll have a look at that more in the demo CD. So we've got our contents page here. So there's Mark Hamill. Read through some of that interview, I think. What else we've got? We've got Zork Nemesis. Now, the Zork series, probably one of the longer running adventure puzzle style games. I know initially, I think with Zork 1, it started out as purely text-based from memory. I think I played a bit of it back in the day. I'm talking Zork 1 and 2. But obviously later on, they went down this path of the sort of CD-ROM. I'm not sure if it was full motion video. I think it was more like sort of pre-rendered scenery that you click through, at least through the later Zork titles. I'm not sure about Nemesis, but we'll find out more in the review, I guess. And here we've got a review for Bad Mojo. A cockroach game, you better believe it. Surprisingly hot play 2, proving that all good ideas haven't been had yet. So I guess way before Untitled Goose Game and that Goat Simulator game, you had Bad Mojo. So we'll look into that. Standard layout. So the reviews are Conquest of the New World, so that'll be interesting. Advanced Tactical Fighter, Big Red Racing, Silent Thunder, Deep Space Nine, Harbinger, Silent Hunter, Atmosphere, Bad Mojo, and Zork Nemesis. And cover story. Letters to the editor. What's interesting here? First of all, congratulations on the first issue of your magazine. Australia has needed a monthly PC-only games publication, complete with a cover CD-ROM disc for a long time. I'm sure you'll be successful, as your price is only about half of that most overseas rivals. Well done. Yeah, so this is very much true. I do remember you could sort of get PC Gamer, which I believe was a UK publication, but it was quite pricey and it didn't come out as frequently. I don't think it was monthly, at least in Australia. But yeah, this PC PowerPlay was definitely monthly. As you can see, this person writing in sort of liked that and the fact it was cheap as well. So yeah, can't go wrong. What else? Some more praise. And yeah, here over on the flip side, we've got seismologist prediction. Seismologists predict the biggest quake to rock the world will hit soon. Coming soon for your PC. So this mag was published before Quake came out, the retail version at least. And yeah, that was it. I mean, to this ad's point, it was a major deal for first person shooters. It's sort of, in terms of its, firstly, its net playability, I mean, it's modding after the fact ability. The mod scene was crazy for Quake, and it really, I think it is probably the most important first person shooter, I think, of all time. I'm sure others will disagree, but there's several reasons for that. Perhaps I'll cover it in a video in future. Still life of the Mind Drive. While the force feedback stick takes reality simulation to new heights, Mind Drive is moving fast in precisely the opposite direction. The device allows control of computer games by thought alone. Looking much like a thimble with a wire hanging off it, the Mind Drive interprets your wishes in the form of an electrical signal. Yeah. Well, I'm sure that didn't take off or didn't work too well, because I haven't heard too much of that. Wonder what, how that ended up panning out. Over here, we've got some news about some force feedback joysticks. Yeah, the Cyberman. Logitech releases Cyberman, an unusual device that essentially functions as a 3D mouse. Its most interesting feature was the internal electric motor that vibrated the device whenever something appropriate happened, like bumping into something or taking hits from enemy fire. That's interesting. So it seems like this incorporated, initial sort of force feedback. There you go, the first force feedback stick from CH. It's a new era in gaming. And obviously force feedback is sort of standard almost, even just console controls these days. It's interesting that it was implemented way back in 96 here. It's pretty cool. Got the charts. So top selling games for May 1996. Civ 2, Zork Nemesis, Descent 2, Command & Conquer, Silent Hunter, Duke Nukem 3D shareware. So that's crazy if you think about it. These are full release titles, and this is how popular Duke Nukem 3D was. You know, when the initial reviews came out and screenshots, and people were really raving about the game, and it's crazy to see that people actually paying money for shareware games, even in the mid to late 90s. In 1996, it's actually outsold Worms here. So yeah, it's definitely putting it on the charts. Conquest of the New World. Win a trip to New Zealand. That's pretty cool. I wonder if anyone ever won that trip. Be interesting to hear from them how their trip to New Zealand went on the back of a Conquest of the New World competition. This is actually a really underrated title. I have sort of not covered it, but I've previewed it in some of my videos, and yeah, it's I think it's a really good turn-based strategy if you're into that. Further news, we've got the Ultima Online. The Ultima series have always been games that have pushed gaming technology to its limits. Now Origin have decided to unleash what 12 months ago would have seemed impossible at best. Ultima Online taking the incredibly popular RPG series to the internet. The multiplayer incarnation of the game resembles Ultima 8 in terms of visual quality, and allows the player to interact with other human-controlled characters in a huge dynamic in virtual world. So, yeah, I'd be keen to hear from people who actually played Ultima Online. I think I've said this before, but Ultima as a series I've unfortunately never played through, but I know I'm aware how popular it's been and sort of foundational to video gaming history in general, and I really am wanting to go back and play through them. Who knows if there's Ultima Online servers still being supported by some diehard fans out there currently. Might look into that at some point, but yeah, I still got to play through the actual single player versions of the earlier games. Quake Watch. So here's a segment. Quake, the phenomenon the game, or as id Software puts it, the sequel to Doom that will make you spooge. Just a few months ago, the internet was rocked by the release of the first deathmatch test. By the time you read this, the shareware release should be just weeks away. Here's the latest new info and gossip about Quake. The hackers were busy at work within days of the release of the initial tests. Add-ons already available include levels with monsters patched in, new textures for players to make them look like Arnie in Terminator, Boba Fett, a Stormtrooper, or Warhammer 40k Space Marine. For a list of files, try Quake Stomping Grounds at www.stomp.com or the Aftershock Quake website. Yeah, so I mean, it was a great feature of Quake in general is that you could quite easily build your own, design your own sort of player skins. And if the server that you were playing on allowed sort of client download of those skins, then you could effectively run around with your customized player skin that you've, edited in some sort of custom editor, or maybe even like MS Paint or something. And yeah, you'd be able to like sort of show that off in whatever server or deathmatch or arena you were playing on. So it was like pretty groundbreaking to be able to do that. And there were all sorts of crazy things. Like I remember there was a skin with, a player running around as Pink Panther and various characters of like obviously movies and so on. But yeah, what else do we have to say about Quake here? 3 new weapons have been added to the 6 seen in the test release. These are the lightning gun, chain lightning gun, and an axe with some serious carnage when gunpowder weapons just don't cut it. Yeah, so we mentioned John Carmack down here. Dynamic lighting has been added to the game engine as in Descent. When you fire a rocket into a dark corridor, you'll see it light up the walls as it shoots down. Beta testers at id Software report that programming god John Carmack took only 1 hour, including toilet break, to add this to the game. So there you go. It's a point in time prior to one of the biggest FPSs of all time. Sidelines. LucasArts are finishing work on X-Wing vs. TIE Fighter. It will offer the multiplayer space action that we've been waiting for since Wing Commander Armada. LucasArts are apparently modifying the characteristics of the spacecraft in the game to provide more balance. There you go. Some news about Sierra Online to do with Lynx Threat 6 Pro, which is a golf game. Never really been into my golf games. Over on the flip side, we've got D, which I believe, again, puzzle-style horror game. It's quite a big thing back in the mid to late 90s. I keep referring to that era. There was Seventh Guest and Sequel 11th Hour, and then you had Phantasmagoria, which was actually banned in Australia. And then you had D came out as well around this era. Never actually played it, but yeah, released in March 96. It came out on PlayStation as well and the Sega Saturn, so not just PC CD-ROM. Japan's hottest selling game is coming to Australia. There you go. Any fans of D out there? Let me know if it's worth playing. Hands-on experiences with some hardware. So we've got some more joysticks, some sound, Creative Labs speakers as well. Nice. Tunnel B1, it's coming, AU game. I'm not sure about Tunnel B1. Looks like just from those screenshots, it's hard to tell. Is it like a mech sim or an action mech game? I have to look into that. There's a write-up on DirectX here. So Windows gaming has come of age thanks to some snappy code from the house of Microsoft known as DirectX. There are 5 individual APIs included in DirectX. Each offers a huge advantage to gamers, and each overcomes the inherent limitations of Windows 3.1. There you go. This is probably DirectX 1 as it came out. And yeah, this sort of massively helped gaming sort of switch from DOS to Windows. Made it sort of unified general way to access hardware, and yeah, really kicked off gaming on Windows. Over on the flip page, we have Resurrection Rise 2. It's Rise of the Robots, I believe. And yeah, what can you say? Some people are diehard fans for this game. I think it was a bit of a flop. I hope people don't mind me saying that when it came out. There was a really big sort of, I'd say, underground fan base for a game called One Must Fall. What was it, 2097? Which was basically a robot fighting game, and you could choose your robot after each battle. I should explain it's a obviously one-on-one fighting game, and after each battle you could modify the various aspects of your robot. And yeah, the robots are obviously like 10 stories high, and you've got a little person that pilots them. It was actually really underrated compared to obviously the big 90s fighting games were Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, but One Must Fall, really understated title, which is quite enjoyable to play. I think Rise of the Robots and its sequel really tried to build on that. Had some amazing, lovely 3D rendered art of the robots that you'd be fighting with, but the gameplay just really didn't do it for most people. It's sort of, yeah, I don't think it did as well as the developers wanted it or thought they would do with it. But yeah, I'm sure there's some fans out there for it. It's interesting. Web Stalker. Normally finding the right page is like trying to find a grain of sand amongst a barrel of hundreds and thousands. Should say that this is prior to, obviously, most of the better search engines existing out there. So prior to Google's, we had, you know, it was the Wild West of search engines, and some were better than others. Hence, you know, most magazines, and you could even buy sort of internet directories that effectively, you know, listed the best websites, and you'd actually have these in magazine form. This is a gaming magazine, so they've listed some random web pages here that are cool to check out. So what do we got? We got a Dark Forces website. Wonder if that's still online. Microweb Asante. Try hand at building your own Descent city. Okay. A utility that will let you create your very own 3D descent level. Oh, that's cool. Someone's offered like a build engine for Descent. Nice. We've got proaxis.com/tilde/row/doom. Is that an IV or LV? 1v.htm. This Doom site is a fantastic repository of utilities and levels catering to fans and, well, fans of the greatest game of all. Be cool though. There's Doom CAD 6.1 for the more engineering-minded. Just submit your plans in the form of an AutoCAD file, and Doom CAD will build you an entire city block in the blink of an eye. Yeah, so that's something to talk about. So both Doom and Quake, I believe, sort of had like levels based on CAD. So it was a bit of a learning curve to actually build levels for those games. I mean, if you knew like AutoCAD, you'd be sort of natural at building stuff. The other main thing was that the editors usually required a PC with pretty beefy specs. Like you needed a pretty good card to sort of build the stuff. When I say card, I mean video card. And yeah, just generally decent specs. I do remember trying to build Quake levels back in the day, and it was quite a slog on my old PC. I think I had a 486 back then. This is in contrast to something like Duke Nukem 3D, which actually shipped with its own like build engine, where you could actually build the levels of the game, and it was quite intuitive. You had everything you need. If the game sort of ran well on your PC, then the build engine level editor would let you build levels very easily. But yeah, in some instances, for example, Doom here, you needed to download extra editors to do so. It's probably the one point where Duke's Radio is probably easier to mod than Quake, but I think Quake and even Doom to some extent were easier in the long run. And down here we have, there are only 10 multiplayer maps in the standard game of Command & Conquer. So the editors found at this site will prolong the action and can be fun to use anyway. The flat map nature of this game and the friendly editor makes this game exceptionally easy to customize. So I've got a Command & Conquer level editor here, which is pretty rad. Never dove into that aspect of Command & Conquer, but it's interesting to see that it existed. On the flip side, we have an ad for Separation Anxiety. Was that the name of the game? Weird that they've got it in smaller fonts, but it's the Venom vs. Spider-Man. Is that a beat 'em up? I've never actually played that, so I do like my beat 'em ups. I don't know how that's gone under the radar with 95 SNES and Mega Drive. I'll have to check that one out. Down here, Dream Machines and Designers. The warmingly familiar tones of the Beyond 2000 music open distributed to 0 hours. Okay, sure, I should explain that Beyond 2000 was a TV show that ran in Australia from, I think, through the 80s. I don't think it was earlier than the 80s, into the 90s. And it was basically like a future, science and design show, which utilized all the things we were promised right around the corner just after the year 2000, such as jetpacks, flying cars, hoverboards, all that cool stuff that never actually arrived. But yeah, that's what they're talking about there, and it had a pretty cool intro song that was, well, maybe not cool, but it was memorable at least.
Hello, and thanks for joining us on Beyond 2000.
This looks like a CD to let you, basically like an interactive edutainment about supercars, which is kind of cool. Now, yeah, I mean, people may be shocked to know that people actually paid money for this stuff. These days you just hop on the internet and you find, this in a web page, or you can find cool videos or images even of like what have you, supercars, and all the specs and stats and so on, at the click of a button or a quick Google search. But yeah, in 1996 you needed to pay $49.95 for a CD-ROM that gave you a lowdown on that stuff. Probably only a handful of cars in the CD-ROM, but hey, any form of media that was available on, I guess, PCs at the time was just felt groundbreaking. Like it was a case of, in the early 90s, you had really simplistic, pixelated, often interlaced, really basic art. The idea of a photo, like a photo quality, like say 16-bit or 32-bit, like true color photo on a computer was like a groundbreaking concept, believe it or not. And even video was just like, wow, how is this how is this possible on a computer? So yeah, that's why people, I guess, paid money to see that stuff on CD-ROM, be able to click through it. Pre-popularization or mainstreamification of the internet. Got an ad for the Muppet CD-ROM. Looks like another, speaking of interactive edutainment, looks like it's along those cards for the Muppets. So something for everyone. Alrighty, so now this is a feature of the front cover. The first look at the future, Kali multiplayer gaming on the net. So the ultimate multiplayer game, You vs. the World, And I've got some screenshots here, and this actually looks like it's a very early iteration of Kali, and we've even got like a DOS version. I wasn't actually aware that it actually came out on DOS. The version that I had, pretty sure it's like Kali 95. Yeah, the initial Windows 95 version. I'm pretty sure I sent away you paid like $15 US via like money order or check, and then you'd actually get a serial back in the post. I think it took like six weeks or something to get my serial to unlock the actual client, that allowed you to then play, games online that didn't natively support it. But yeah, look, let's read this first part here. The four combatants have never met, probably never will. Each sit in front of a PC. Each is in a different country. They fight a war set in the distant future. It runs on a computer in yet another country. At the end of the war, they all chat amiably for a while, then some say goodnight, while others say good morning. It's over until the next war. Perhaps a different game next time, perhaps the different players. This is very cool. This is real. This is Kali. Yeah, so again, games that are supported. Well, let's back up here. Kali is written by John J. Cotton, who before forming Kali Inc. was a database application programmer. He describes in his own words as not very exciting work. Kali allows you to play games over the internet that were written to run using the IPX protocol for local area networks, LANs. Kali has been used to play Descent, Doom, Doom 2, Heretic, Hexen, Command & Conquer, Apache, Rise of the Triad, Terminal Velocity, Warcraft, Warcraft 2, VR Pool, Supercarts, Mortal Kombat 3, EF2000, and other games. Unfortunately, Kali would not work with games that require net bias, such as MechWarrior 2 and the Bullfrog games. Yeah, so that's a really quick summary of what Kali was about. And this was groundbreaking because sort of for most of these titles, you had to, the only real way to play against friends would have been either one, so it's the LAN, bring all your friends over, play throughout the day and sometimes the night. And then the other option was, direct modem to modem. So you'd actually have to dial the other player's phone number and play that way. And that was only 1v1. So you couldn't really do that with multiple players. But at a LAN, obviously, you could play up to how many players were in the room, and I guess how much your network switch could support. But yeah, Kali sort of took that and ran with it. They basically had their own sort of virtual network, were able to log into, and then they'd reroute everything as if it was an internal network. And that's how it allowed these games to play, or you could play anyone who used the Kali client around the world effectively. And that said, I'll draw a big line under that with an asterisk and say, this was the era of like 28K modems. I think 33.6s were just out or around the corner. And that meant the pings were atrocious. We're talking like you'd be lucky to get like a 200 ping. Maybe 250 would be lucky. Yeah, so almost unplayable in some regards, especially for the your Dooms and your Hexens and so on. I know later on this supported Duke 3D as well. Maybe the real-time strategies were a bit more forgiving in terms of I guess, I don't know how intensive they were in terms of network play, but they seem to, Command & Conquer in particular, seem to run a bit better. But yeah, the first-person shooters obviously need like split-second timing, as opposed to, I guess Command & Conquer back in the day. But yeah, that's Kali. I might do a rundown at some point of what Kali was like. See if I can track down the executable and run through some of that stuff. But yeah, it was definitely a point in time. I actually do remember that I ran it initially and then something happened, like the serial expired or I like lost it and then they wouldn't renew it for me. So actually didn't end up playing over Kali for too long. Oh, actually the other thing that I remember about Kali was it gave you, well, there was a Duke 3D website called Casey's Ladder, and it was a fan site that effectively ranked the world's best players in various games. And if you were up on this ladder, if you were number one, you were considered like top of the pops. And yeah, Kali a lot of those games and those matches were organized on Kali. So it was quite, it was a gateway to basically playing a bunch of cool games against people you didn't know. So, these days, a lot of those clients are built into games and it's very easy. You can hop into any game and, it's got an auto matchmaker and you click search and that's it. Back in 1996, you needed to do a bit more. You needed to download a separate client. You needed to pay money for that. And the experience wasn't great, but it was definitely groundbreaking and memorable. Yeah, Kali was, quite a cool thing in the mid-90s. Jay, is there anything you'd like to say to our Australian readers? I have a lot of people in Australia wanting to use Kali, but complaining about the overseas connections. There are now at least 6 servers in Australia and hundreds of registered users down there. Servers in the US are certainly very popular, but until you start taking advantage of the servers down there for finding local players, I fear that Kali will never get big like it is here. You just need to make the people in Australia aware of the fact that there is already a very large population wanting to play, and that it's only a matter of time before we start seeing the same crowds on the Australian servers as you see in the US. So yeah, this is talking about my experience. So initially, I think there weren't that many Australian servers, and you'd have to basically be routed to the US, and then I mentioned 250 pings, but that would have been quite difficult to achieve if you're hitting a US server. It'd be more like sort of 400 or 500, and that's when things become really unplayable, especially in FPSs. But I guess if you joined an Australian server, things were a bit better and a bit improved. What prompted you to write Kali? Are you yourself a Mad Games player feeling the need to play over the net, or was it purely based on untapped market? I just wanted to play the game of the descent against Scott Coleman, who lived in Illinois, over 1,000 miles away, and I didn't want to play long distance for the phone call, didn't want to pay long distance. In the effort, I realized the potential, and although I never suspected it would get this popular, I knew it was a cool idea at least. What do you see as the future of Kali besides the upgrade to Windows 95? Do you think software companies will develop the approach of using your software? Would they rather waste their own valuable time and money adding in TCP/IP support? No one knows yet. That is a big question right now. Few companies are satisfied with achieving Kali compatibility, while others feel that they want to do it all themselves. Some companies have signed deals with 10, so that was the total entertainment network, potential competitor with a lot of funding and no product. So eventually these guys would launch, and I do remember it was pretty heavy in marketing, so I guess they did have a lot of funding. By that time, I think there was a major shift in like the games themselves. They sort of supported TCP/IP natively. Like for example, Quake became, the standard for first-person shooters, and you could actually just use a client, and as long as someone was running a server, you could just play for free. So that definitely, as well, it's what happened effectively with these types of companies. But for a while there, especially when these games didn't support that protocol, Kali was at the forefront of this stuff. To add to that question, companies such as Origin developing Ultima Online utilizing their own client-server technology, does it challenge the Kali market? Absolutely. Kali will either have to change or die as games are written solely for internet play. We still have at least another year of seeing DOS games, but eventually people will move to Windows, and the purpose of Kali will have to change. Why go to fill in the gaps in multiplayer game design? There will always be room for improvement, and Kali will fill that void. More questions about viability. How many Kali servers are there in the world? About 30 public servers in about 10 countries and several other private servers. That's interesting. I wonder, it was an experience in Australia to play on it, and I'm imagining some people around the globe in Europe, maybe the UK, used it. I'm not too sure. Be interested to hear from you if you remember using Kali back in the 90s. Okay, so So there was K-Chat, which was a type of busy arrival departure terminal. As players come in, they will often announce to themselves, CNC anyone, which translates to, would anyone like to game of CNC? If others are in the process of forming a game and reply such as CNC here, you are player 3-4 would be sent. This translates as a positive acceptance of a CNC game, and then you are player 3 of a 4-player game. Everyone will then wait for the 4th player. Once the 4th player has arrived at the game, a game can be started. Everyone will quit out of K-Chat and run CNC, selecting the multiplayer option. The first player of the game, the player who formed the current group, will create a new game with a unique handle. So, yeah, as you can tell from this paragraph, matchmaking being automated wasn't a thing, and it looks like it was actually just organized by these chat channels. I don't remember playing multiplayer stuff on there, but I do remember 1v1s and having these chats. But yeah, it's interesting that if you wanted multiplayer games, you'd have to announce your player 3 or 4, etc. to dive in. But yeah, Kali culture. There are a few rules of etiquette that must be adhered to when using Kali. Firstly, make sure you have the same version of the game everyone else has. Some games, like Warcraft 2, have a special batch files, optionally for use with Kali. These can always be found on the net. If you have an older version and need a patch, get it. Otherwise, people will be reluctant to either let you join the game or join one you create. Yeah, cool. Unfortunately, what most people using Kali, what could be termed as techno fiends. In other words, they all tend to have the latest and greatest PC hardware, and they do discriminate against those who don't. Consequently, if you only have a 14.4 modem and a 486 DX2, you probably won't be able to get a game using Kali. Pretty sad indictment there of people with older hardware. But it would actually, like in the example of a 4-player game, if one of the packets would need to be routed from the server to all the clients. So, and obviously this wasn't super advanced network play in a lot of these games, especially with a prediction. So if you had one player with a 14.4 modem and the rest with faster ones, you'd get dragged down to sort of that base speed, or at least when you're interacting with that client, which wasn't fun. So yeah, people would definitely discriminate against people with crappy hardware. To give you a quick idea, modems, sort of paying a 14.4 modem back in the day would have cost you like almost $300 when it was new. That's Australian. That's about $150 US. And yeah, if you wanted a 28.8, it'd be a bit more, like close to 400. And then 33.6 was, yeah, up there as well. So pretty pricey hardware to get online and do this stuff. Kali jargon. FFA, free for all. So this is interesting. This is probably like a lot of people use these terms in modern games, and they probably wonder where they came from. I mean, maybe not all these, but definitely FFA is still used. Ogre rule: no attacking until you have ogres or knights. Okay, so that's guessing from Warcraft 2. TP versus BTTM. The top players in the playlist team up against the bottom players. Okay, so that's a pretty efficient way to matchmake. First contact. Teams are formed with whoever you encounter first on the game map. No rules. Expect no grunt rush early in the game. And so on. There you go. Ships as a shareware product. Let's you play for 15 minutes. Oh, I do remember that actually. I used to just get kicked all the time and it was really annoying. Downloaded from ftp.kali.net. Cost $20 to register. There you go. So that was Kali. Yeah, pretty groundbreaking and definitely a point in time for multiplayer in 1996. When the awesome Thrustmaster F16 cockpit plus the full set of Thrustmaster controllers. Was that actually a prize? That's pretty epic. The classic sort of CRT was like a 14-inch. I wonder if this box actually was legit or if it was just the stuff inside. No, it is. It's a full-size replica of the cockpit section of an F-16 fighter. Its banks or switches, gauges, or indicator lights are all fully programmable. Okay, look, if you won this prize, I really want to hear from you because that's amazing. I need to send PO Box, Strawberry Hills, New South Wales. Yeah, I didn't enter this comp, needless to say. You need pretty big space to store that, I reckon. There you go. Speaking of modems just then. So it looks like 33.6s weren't out yet. This is a 28, obviously competition being run here. There you go. Didn't subscribe or win this, unfortunately. Some music ads. Siberia 2 ads. Oh, cool. Interview with Mark Hamill. So, Mark Hamill is a man comfortable in a prop cockpit set against a special effects blue screen. These days, you're more likely to see the end result on your PC. Cool. I won't read through all this, but feel free to pause it and zoom in. Have you ever used a PC yourself? Mark Hamill. Well, right now the computer we have is old. It really needs an urgent upgrade. Origin gave us a 3DO for Wing 3. I love that idea. Mark Hamill playing Wing Commander 3 on a 3DO. That's awesome. Because I wasn't lying to people on the last PR tour we did when I said, well, I haven't actually played it. It was driving them nuts, so they sent me that. Maybe I should start hinting around that I need a Porsche or something. Nice. How did you become involved in the Wing Commander series? I'd done an interactive before I did Wing, something with Tim Curry called Gabriel Knight, which was voiceover only. Okay, so that's interesting. I didn't know that Mark Hamill did voiceover for Gabriel Knight, but I haven't actually finished that game either. That's one for the backlog. I played the shareware, I think, back in the day. That's cool. I'll have to look out for that. Then I went to go on a meet and greet with Chris Roberts about Wing Commander 3. First, when I went to see Chris, I didn't fully understand that it was going to be live action. And when he was telling me about it, I came to the conclusion that I had misread the situation. I mean, it's one thing sitting in the studio with all the pages in front of you, but doing a movie that way, ... What changed your mind? I guess I found it very reassuring that the guy who actually created the game was going to be directing, especially when it would be uncharted waters for me. Interactive games, by definition, must cater for a number of possible outcomes as the plot develops. Apart from making the script about 3 times as large as its linear movie counterparts, the actor must also create multiple personalities for his character. That's cool. I'm sure there's a bunch of Wing Commander fans out there. I do have the games. I've tracked down the physical copies of 1, 2, and 3, and they are, again, on the backlog. I do know they are quite in-depth and time-consuming, so I do want to set aside the right amount of time to play through them. But yeah, I won't read the rest of that. Feel free to do so. Previews, cool. So we've got a game called Deadline published by Cynosis, depending on where you're from and how you want to pronounce that. Or is it Cygnosis? Is it silent G or not? Is the jury out on that? I know for a while in Australia we used to refer to id Software as ID Software. Yeah. The things you do as kids. So this looks like it's like an isometric sort of team management SWAT game. That could be cool. Never actually heard of that. Now I'll have to check it out. Return Fire, top-down action strategy game. Cool. Tanks are always cool. Out from Prolific. Okay, Fable. So, haven't played Fable. Actually picked it up somewhat recently based on a review from, shout out to Hungry Gorilla. Does really good reviews, I think, of adventure games and RPGs, and one of those was Fable, and it looked like it was right up my alley, so I've picked it up, but I haven't played through it yet. But looking forward to that. Mission Force Cyberstorm. With Earthsiege 2 running hot at the moment, Sierra can be forgiven for milking their metal tech universe for all it's worth. So in the mid-90s, like for some reason, well, not for some reason, because everyone can understand how cool mechs are, but mech warrior games, mech warrior style games were just really a thing. Like everybody wanted to play them, and there's Earthsiege and Mech Warrior 1 and 2, and this looks like it was trying to build on the back of that. with a sort of strategy game where you control mechs rather than like a first-person action title. I should probably just go over that quickly. Telstar Electronic Studios were behind a particular awful PlayStation game called Lone Soldier. Vietnam War-style action game had no enjoyable gameplay. Okay. Someone must have had a quiet word because the second effort, Fable, is a huge improvement. Absolutely nothing in common with Lone Soldier. Plot has something to do with the supreme race of astral beings, enslavement of the human race, and conspiracy and consequential unleashing of the cataclysms. The bottom line is that it's a point-and-click adventure game, complete with inventory and intelligent mouse cursor. Playing it was reminiscent of the wonderful Discworld. So as I said, right up my alley, and I'll have to check that out very soon. We've got Baldies here. So I do remember playing this on a demo CD. I can't remember. Is it on this one? I'll double check that. But strange, really strange strategy game. And if I don't cover it on this read through, I'll definitely cover it through on one of the other PC PowerPlay read throughs because it is definitely on one of those demo CDs. Well, this is a very promising looking strategy game. It's got it all: cute little characters, cute sound effects, cute buildings, and cute little animals that run around freely, eating each other when they're not being cute. Baldies also has a clever gameplay and an interface from heaven. There you go. They're a race of shiny heads that, if left alone, run happily and aimlessly around the island scenarios they call home. Each Baldy can be changed into a particular type, like a worker, soldier, or scientist. They can then be given specific jobs, like building structures, repairing damaged ones, or developing and delivering new weapons. On to Interpose. You can't spend all your PC gambling life micromanaging vast empires or putting into practice your mastery of the weapon and radar systems of an accurately modelled F16. No, sometimes you need nothing more than a fast and colourful side-scrolling shooter to purge those built-up work stresses. Very true. Over here on the flip page, we've got Rally Australia. It looks like a Sega Rally style game. CD-ROM, 1 to 2 players. There's one thing the PC gaming world has been crying out for. It's a good rally driving game. Some fairly dismal efforts in the past haven't done a lot to push the exploitation of this most deserving genre. But now it looks like we'll finally get a decent rally game to call our own. Literally our own. Rally Australia is, as you would expect, Australian. Silver Lightning Software are behind it. These West Australian developers have had reasonable success in the past with share action games like Starfire and Starhammer, and came close to hitting the big time with the admirable RPG Trial by Magic. Cool. So more previews here. We've got Back to Baghdad. So Back to Baghdad looks like a flight sim. Seems like an eternity since a proper jet combat sim was released. All the recent titles have inclined more towards the fun and simple end of the scale, with EF 2000 being the only recent release that deserves to sit on the shelf beside ancient but still superior sims like Tornado and Spectrum Holobyte's legendary Falcon 3.0. So it looks like more of a hardcore flight sim than an action shooting game. Alrighty, Lighthouse. So published from Sierra. A friend calls up and asks you to babysit his 1-year-old daughter. You're pleased to oblige, but on the way over a space-time gateway appears out of nowhere and sucks you into a parallel universe. Yeah, that old story. Happens every day. Lighthouse is not, however, meant to be plausible. Sierra in the mood for a cult game. It's been about a decade since the original Leisure Suit Larry, and it seems Sierra want to be cool again. Good call too. Many of their recent offerings have been sanitized, characterless, and just plain dull. So enter Lighthouse and its surreal world of part fantasy, some science fiction, and a dash of traditional fairy tale. The game world is truly beautiful. It's all in full 3D, but of the pre-rendered variety, which looks far better than the rendered on-fly approach used by 3D action games, but only allows you to move within preset pathways. Okay, so it's very much up the classic sort of Myst style approach to gameplay. Look, these games, when they came out, they were so cutting edge, like leading back into what I was saying earlier about, being able to have true color, 3D, even just photographs and sound and so on CD-ROM was really groundbreaking. And a lot of companies ran with this and just, it seems like the main selling point of the game was that rather than the actual gameplay. I have heard that Lighthouse is actually really good, though I've never played it, but I definitely, there was a point at which you've played a bunch of these games and they get very samey, and you realize that they're actually not a whole bunch of fun once the novelty of the really cool graphics and like pre-rendered 3D stuff fades away. You're left with like this feeling of just having like an empty, like basically world that just you inhabit, no one else does. But yeah, maybe Lighthouse is different. I'll have to look into that. Alrighty, over on the flip side, we've got a game called Rama, which is an adventure puzzle game. And again, looks like it's in that same genre. Arthur C. Clarke is a name known not only to sci-fi fans. The prolific author is most famous for 2001. Only marginally less popular is his series of Rama books, which began with a brilliant Rendezvous with Rama. Plot follows the appearance of a massive alien spacecraft in the solar system and the adventurers of the astronauts sent up to explore it. Yeah, the adventurers, I should say. The story has enormous potential as a game, a fact which didn't escape the attention of Sierra, who are working on Rama in collaboration with Arthur C. Clarke. Yeah, wow. That's pretty epic. I'm not sure if there's anyone out there who's a massive fan of this game, but I'm going to suspect that it's in the same sort of everything looks cool and feels cool, but when it comes down to it, it feels a bit hollow. But yeah, perhaps I should play the game to actually find out if that's the case. Alrighty, we get to the other cover story, which is Earthsiege 2. I mentioned briefly before the real sort of fascination with mech warriors around 1995. Everything cool was mech warrior related. So this looks like a Sierra attempt at that. It's a Windows 95 game, was my first impression when I received Earthsiege 2. The drawbacks of the game that runs under Win95 are big. Pauses between the menu screens and in-game screens, and the fact that you'll need a Pentium to run it in high resolution. The benefits are you don't have to go messing around with DOS config sys and auto-exec back files. Yeah, we all remember that. Or make boot disks. You would be advised to set up Win95 user profile just for your games and keep another for your web surfing and work, because Earthsiege does not like other progs running with it and it wants 256 color mode. Yeah, really pushing the hardware. Applications running in the background will freak Win95 games out and slow them down. Okay, so after a fairly low-key intro, you set your preferences and proceed with a few training missions that ease you into the job of piloting the Hercs, as the mechs are called in Earthsiege 2. Anyone who has mastered Mech 2 will sail through because the Hercs are very easy to pilot. In fact, anybody who played Earthsiege 1 will be right at home, as in Earthsiege 2, the cockpit is almost the same. Cool. Some pretty nice cockpit views here, and looks like the external graphics are actually pretty impressive. They're better than MechWarrior 2, but still sparse. That was the thing with, again, just a hardware limitation. But if you did have 3D games, they were quite empty. You had your, usually one or two enemies and then a bot. like a base that you'd be attacking, but otherwise it'd just be flat landscape as far as the eye can see, which is like sort of what you see here. Really going all out in the review here. Oh, here we go. Interesting. Earthsiege 2 versus Mech Warrior 2. So Earthsiege 2 had far less initial impact than Mech 2. How could you beat Mech 2's killer intro? When I bought it, even the salesperson said, that intro is nasty, it will give you shivers. It did. I still watch it every time I load it up. In comparison, Earthsiege 2's intro just fills you in on what's going on. Earth's Last Hope kind of stuff. Where Earthsiege 2 is better than Mech Warrior 2 is the team play of the squad. In the latter missions, you have to become skilled at deploying your squad, or you'll get overrun. Full-on firepower alone will not work at this stage. Mech 2 differs in that each single mission has more depth than Earthsiege 2, but in Mech 2, unless you are having trouble making it through mission, you rarely take a starmate along. While Earthsiege 2 missions are over quicker, there are over 50 of them. Fair enough. Funnily enough, these two games that have so much in common feel so different that it is actually pretty hard to compare them, a bit like Dark Forces vs. Doom. Yeah, interesting comparison. Imagine Mech 2 as Doom, your old favourite for a blast fest, while Dark Forces is Earthsiege 2. Mech 2 with a twist. So there you go. PC PowerPlay gave this 85%. I'll have to try this out one day. Got some competitions. Warcraft 2 and Command & Conquer giveaway. D up for grabs. Zork Nemesis. Conquest of the New World. Okay, so this is what's on the actual CD. And I will get into this. Probably save it right to the end. And then we can just do a slight preview. I'm not going to play through the games, the complete demos, because this video will go for hours. Hopefully you guys can see that black on red. Oh, these are just a bunch of more stuff on the CD. So you got patches. EA Cricket 96, unofficial patch. At the moment, it features all the proper players from Australia, West Indies, South Africa, England, and Pakistan. So I do remember this. I do have this game physical copy, and when you bought it, the game or the company EA didn't have the rights to all the players. So obviously, they just annoyingly named them random people, which is annoying when you buy this type of game. But luckily, someone online just went and patched it, so you could unofficially get all the players. Correct names with player stats and so on makes the games much more enjoyable, I think. Duke Nukem 3 1.1. This patch will update your shareware copy of Duke Nukem 1 to 1.1. Game patch requires that you have your copy of 1 installed. Cool. And there's an ad for Hyperactive. Just like a gamer-focused page. It had like cheats and like hints and stuff, and it was like really cool, like one-stop shop. Normally you have to like browse around the net for that stuff, but this attempted to put it all into one place. Conquest of the New World. So here's another review. And yeah, I've got a soft spot for this game. It's a turn-based strategy, but the pacing is quite interesting. You can really sort of get into the micromanagement of the world, and you got your town building aspect of it. It's not quite Age of Empires. This, of course, being turn-based and focusing more on the historic aspect of exploration, I guess. Almost like a backgammon style combat mechanic, which is interesting. And the exploration had a turn-based sort of approach. So look at the summary of the review. So I got 71%. Easy to pick up and get into. Some features are truly innovative, like victory points for making it to the first top of a mountain first. Again, it's not a lot of depth. Basically, a case of building units and throwing them at your enemy, whilst exploring in your spare time. Yeah, it's probably fair. I guess like it was quite the artwork was cool, and like when you built your little villages and so forth and you had your stats, it sort of made it feel like you were really building something. But it definitely doesn't have the depth of something like an Age of Empires, for example, or a Civilization. Somewhere in between those two. Unbelievably stupid units. Unfortunately, moving units around in Conquest can be awfully boresome. Can be an awful bore sometimes, not because the interface is hard to use, but because the units that is are unbelievably stupid. Jane's Advanced Tactical Fighters. Here's some pretty cool photos there included. I'm not a huge flight sim fan, but looking at the overall review, like the old Birds of Prey, ATF lets you pilot more planes in one game than have been covered in the entire genre. Well, that's cool. Good multiplayer support and easy to use mission builder. Against first EF2000 and now ATF. Whatever happened to the flight sim cockpit? It used to be nice having all those dials and readouts up there on screen. See, I feel like that's I guess if you're really into your flight sims and flight, you really want that stuff. But as a player of the game, sometimes it can be a bit full on. Maybe the compromise is to have an option to switch it off. But it looks like it's not super detailed, but so you've got some HUD and 486 GX 266 8 meg RAM. You want a Pentium 33, 72%. Big Red Racing. Okay, so it almost looks like a. I do remember playing the shareware version of this. Firstly, it almost looks like what I would think a Nintendo 64 game is representative of. More on the fun side of things. If anything, it's like an attempt to make a game like Micro Machines, but in 3D. So it's not taking itself too seriously. And it's really cool because it's 3D, but as you can see, the polygon count isn't very high. But, it doesn't take away from the fun of it, or at least from what I remember playing the shareware version. Against lovers of traditional combat flight sim complexity will be disappointed. The game doesn't have a manual and doesn't need one either. There you go. For instantly accessible action with no learning curve to speak of. Beautiful terrain graphics. Yep, very beautiful. Look, cutting edge back in 96, right? Some of the meteorous explosions around. Good fun. Ooh, so it actually had damage. I don't remember that too much. Man, like 1996 was the era of flight sims, apparently. Sierra have resurrected the DirectX label. The old spirit is back. Silent Thunder. So this is another flight sim. Accessible fun. Dynamics have been resurrected, but without the guiding influence of original team leader Damon Sly, who possessed not just a snappy name, but the touch needed to make the old games approachably playable. Silent Thunder is A10 too, but without the hand of Sly involved. Who knows what direction Damon would have taken this game in today. Cool. Overall 72%. Similar specs to the last games. Against lovers of traditional combat flight sim complexity will be disappointed. The game doesn't have a manual and doesn't need one either. Okay, so is that an error? Yes, I've just copied and pasted that. I thought that was strange that they were talking about combat flight sim complexity in Big Red Racing. Oopsies. Hey, the magazine second issue, so some edit mistakes are to be expected. Star Trek Deep Space Nine Harbinger. Alrighty, so this is an adventure game. It looks like it's sort of almost 3D style, Alone in the Dark-esque perhaps. Murder, conspiracy, and political intrigue. In Harbinger, the player assumes the role of a Tyrian delegate from the Gamma Quadrant. At the start of the game, your ship is attacked by hostile drones, and you only just manage to nurse your crippled craft to the Deep Space Nine station. From here on, your character becomes involved in a murder, conspiracy, and political intrigue. Central plot involves stopping an aggressive, unknown alien race from annihilating a Federation allied planet and saving the space station DS9 from suffering a similar fate. Hey, that sounds like a pretty cool plot. It's definitely got my attention. Looks like it didn't pan out too well with 64% though. So 4 sharp, clean graphics plus the original cast providing voiceovers. Oh, really? I mean, it doesn't mention monotonous dialogue sequences, so that isn't great. Okay, so basically, if you're a Trekkie, you will enjoy it. Against clunky interface and overall design, navigating is a chore, and when it all boils down, there really isn't that much to do in this game. Okay, that's never good, especially if it's an adventure game. You'd hopefully be challenged a bit more. Not sure, I'll check that one out. Okay, so we've had Silent Thunder, now it's Silent Hunter. Another sim, but this is submarines. Making a good submarine game is the holy grail for simulation developers. Virtual World War II submarine warfare. Simulating the US Navy's World War II subs is an interesting departure from the norm, and the multimedia database is good for lengthy perusing. A polished quality piece of work. Against, historical accuracy calls for many different screens showing the sub's controls. An integrated design would have been nice. Yeah, cool. So it's like full hardcore World War II sub game. And hey, if you're into this genre, let me know how good this game is, because once again, not really into the hardcore sims, but I'm sure this probably did its job for the market it was aimed at. Yeah. Atmosphere. Is this the yeah, it is the board game. Okay. Atmosphere, the third in the Nightmare series of the popular video board game, has made the leap onto PC. Yeah, right. So this used to be a pretty cheesy board game that had a VHS that you had to play. And I remember like begging my family to buy it as a kid, but it was quote unquote too much horror. So yeah, we never end up really playing it. But look, it's definitely of an era, and there's apparently a game based on it, which is cool. But with a good premise for a computer game, hopes were high. However, after playing it, I could not have been more disappointed since I found out M&Ms really do melt in your hands. Atmosphere, the board game, was created by a couple of cowboys, with EMG Publishing being given the task of converting it to PC. Okay. 4. Atmosphere is in a class of its own. There is nothing else even remotely like it, one of only a few games of a few friends to play together. If you're not done in by some grossly unjust random element, it'll be the spiteful actions of your fellow players, exercising their only real opportunity for gameplay. Yeah, that's brutal. Might steer clear of that one. Definitely not going on the backlog. Bad Mojo, the Roach game. If you're a game programmer and all your friends constantly complained about the code being full of bugs, what would you do? Would you make a game so full of bugs, big, fat, juicy, creepy, crawly bugs, that they all feel too silly to say anything about it? Or would you just send a trained ferret up their pants? Okay. The people at Pulse Entertainment have taken the first option, much to the relief of their friends. You are Roger Sams, a very nerdy-looking chap who lives in a seedy apartment above a dilapidated old shop. The game opens with a video of Roger gloating over a suitcase full of money he has obviously acquired through illegal means. Money is to be used for some scheme of Roger's, scheme that remains a secret for the present as Roger is soon morphed into a roach. That's the crawling kind. When he opens a drawer in his desk and pulls out a magic locket, yep, you read it right, a magic locket. The programmers were going to be silly anyway. Why didn't they go the whole hog and make it a magic toenail clipping or even a magic a magic suppository? Oh well. So there you are. 1 minute, a tall, strong, sniveling nerd, the next a tiny, helpless cocky. Yeah, right. So it's an adventure game as a cockroach. I mean, it got 82%, so it's got to be worth giving it a go, right? I'm not sure I want to play as a roach in an adventure game. Yeah, might think about that one. So 4 interesting puzzles, atmospheric soundtrack, invisible interface, good graphics, and a nice dose of morality. May even help people with roach phobia. Against scarring can become a bit monotonous at times. Apart from that, there aren't any really bad points to the game. Just depends on your tastes. Zork Nemesis, the other title covered on the front page. I mean, they gave it an 86%, so it's got to be good. Latest adventure game to be set in Zork universe sees the player embarking on a quest to defeat the evil Nemesis, a demonic creature who has murdered the great alchemists of the Empire and damned their souls to hell. To complete your quest, you'll have to travel through 5 worlds, learn the forbidden art of alchemy while solving numerous puzzles and gleaning information about ill-fated alchemists from many notes, artifacts, and other objects scattered about the place. Yeah, so touched on this before, but these games were great because of their technological feats. But after you play a couple of them, you really get the sort of gist and vibe that they are monotonous and they just feel empty. If you've ever played like Myst or like, yeah, as I said, any of those games, 7th Guest, 11th Hour, some of the later Zorks as well. Yeah, it's something that's definitely, it's a game set in a time and a place that was groundbreaking. I'm not sure how well it holds up. Maybe I should go back and play it and decide for myself. So 4, a stunning game world you're compelled to become immersed in. Sound effects are executed by a subtle hand and are near perfect. Against, not totally original, instead a synthesis of many other successful game elements. Tad too puzzle-oriented, and the game bogs down occasionally. Okay, just on that point, some of the puzzles in some of these games are just utterly ridiculous. I remember there's this anagram game, I think it's in 7th Guest, and you know, as a kid, had these like, it was an esoteric bunch of words or this solution that just made no sense at the time. But yeah, some of these puzzles can just be quite out there. It's definitely not standard fare compared to, you know, the average puzzle you'd find in a point and click adventure game or a traditional one, like something from LucasArts or Sierra. Yeah, Zork Nemesis. Okay, some shorter reviews here. Terra Nova, we have an action game. 91%. Guess what type of game it is? It's a mech warrior type blastathon set in the far future when the imperialistic Earth hegemony is trying to forcibly annex the Centauri colonies, which they helped establish 150 years previously. Cool. A slowly unfolding FMV story. Okay, so we've got some full motion video. 91%. That's more than I gave Earthsiege 2. Perhaps we should check this one out. We might backlog it. Starball, pinball game, 45%. Let's skip that one. Virtual snooker, 80%. I think I played this as well, actually. $79.95. I know a lot of people who thought of playing snooker on a PC seems as bad as natural as a hot lard enema and just as exciting. Well, I mean, they gave it 80%, so it must be better. I think this had online play, did it? 1 to 2 players, maybe not. Yeah, I put sort of snooker games up there with golf games, like, just go and do the real thing, right? Capitalism. I've heard this game referenced, but I didn't realize it came out this late. I thought it was an earlier game or based on an earlier game. Market share, stock control, investment, productivity, voting shares, filing bankruptcy, managing resources, etc. If any of these terms mean anything to you, then not only should you see a psychologist, but you would have the basics for this newbie from Interactive Magic, a full-on business management sim for the suit and tie freaks amongst us. Okay, so it's not a new game, but perhaps based loosely on the prior one. Someone can think of the game I'm thinking of. Yeah, very similar sort of concept. And I believe it was like early 90s or late 80s. All right, next page. Complete Carriers War Strategy. It's like is it turn-based or real-time? Can't really tell. 61%, we might skip that one. And get by on pretty decent system requirements though, 386. Star Rangers. Flight sim. So we've got more flight sim stuff, but in space here. It's obvious as the interior cockpit view is almost slanderously identical to WC3. So Wing Commander 3 with a ship shield and hull status in the lower left. Yeah, 57%. I think I'll spend my time on Wing Commander instead. Battleground Ardennes. I know that's a place in France, but apologies for my pronunciation there. Strategy, cool. So this looks more civilization based rather than like commanding turn-based hex combat at its best. Okay, cool. I mean, turn-based games are fun, but you sort of need a really good story to drag you in most of the time. Bad Day on the Midway Adventure. Hey, the graphics look pretty solid, I think. 70%. The key, I think, to this game is when Madame Mandrake, the Midway's resident fortune teller, tells little Timmy, self-preservation is better than nothing. Self-preservation, that is, the very act of surviving through the night you spend in the resident's nightmarish theme park called the Midway, is the closest you get towards achieving success. You enter the Midway as little Timmy. You can explore the grounds visiting such sideshows and attractions as Torture's Top 10, the Killer Commie Shooting Gallery, Oscar the Racing Rat, and Dagmar the Dog Woman. Microfile. Some more tiny reviews. Man, I didn't remember how many reviews were packed into this magazine. It's pretty impressive. They must have had like quite a large staff to like play through all this in a month. I suppose if it's your full-time job. Interactive movie abuse. Occasionally there comes a game that garners a great deal of attention from the net. Usually the game is a big budget release, but sometimes the game is so revolutionary that it creates its own hype. The level of hype surrounding abuse may not be to such extremes, but it has caused a stirring in the gaming community. It was with great excitement then that I unwrapped my copy. Controlling myself, I refrained from hitting the reset button on my computer. Playing some more, I discovered the first alien. It looked like one of the rejects from the alien movies. He ran towards me, and I loosed plasma death at it. Still, it came on until both it and my character sprite overlapped each other. You've got to be kidding. When more than 2 or 3 aliens attack you at once, they all gravitate to your character's position and mill about him. In the end, it is hard to distinguish between hero and alien. Start firing, the screen gets very confusing very quickly. Brutal, 25%. That won't be one for the backlog. You don't know Jack, so I mean, everyone's played one of these trivia games, right? But I didn't realize they go that far back. 1996. It's pretty cool. Yeah, there's genuinely great games. Great for parties and like when you got friends over. Fantasy General Strategy. Looks like it's sort of almost like Civ or Settlers based. A wargaming version of Allied General set in a mythological world populated by dragons, barbarians, and the odd elf. Uses the same game engine as its predecessors and already has the potential for being a classic gaming experience. I'll have to check that one out. Depending on how like in-depth these strategy games get, I can sometimes get turned off them, but it might be one for the backlog. Karma, puzzle game, 20%. Let's skip that. Alrighty, so we've got some codes here, some cheats for games. Mortal Kombat 3, Lion King, Slipstream 5000. Cool, like sort of Wipeout style clone. Really, really fun though to play. Theme Park, I think one of the best like fun management games ever made. I still remember when I first got a copy of it. I'm pretty sure I played it 8 hours straight. I was like didn't get up from the computer because it was just like that addictive. Wing Commander 4, and so on. Sega Aussiesoft PC Hotline. Stuck with any games? Command & Conquer Multiplayer Strategy Guide. It's the ultimate multiplayer strategy. This is the ultimate strategy guide. We won't read through this, but feel free to pause and give it a crack. A bunch of different tactics here. The offensive game, airborne assault. But Command & Conquer is, I mean, it's one of the best RTSs, right? Between it, Warcraft 2 and then Warcraft 3 and then StarCraft, pretty much games haven't gone really any further than StarCraft 2. I mean, they've got like Dota and stuff where it's a bit different. It's not like massive army management, but equally, you know, it definitely got its roots from Command & Conquer and that style of game. The Oracle. Okay, this is like a Q&A. Should be some interesting questions in here. Stuck on Shivers. Chronicles of the Sword. The Oracle. I'm playing Doom 2 and I'm stuck on level 2. Specifically, I can't jump across the gap to the ledge in the building with a red key. I always fall short of the ledge. What's going on? Guy Marzio, Marrickville, New South Wales. Wow, a novice Doom player. I was just going to say this is why I've read it. It's quite surprising. Quite rare these days. Basically, all you need to do is run towards the gap and jump across. Press Shift and the cursor to run. There you go. Frankenstein. The Oracle. I'm stuck at the stone ship, Age in Mist. Can't find the exit. Yeah, so I'm not sure if people are aware, but there was actually a parody game called Pissed, which I'm guessing was made because that's how annoying this game could be. Like, annoying in the sense that the puzzles weren't planned out in the best way. I was recently listening to Ron Gilbert on a panel at PAX, and he made a really good point about how adventure games should be made. The way to make adventure puzzle games is like you shouldn't lay them out so that you find the key before you find the puzzle. And I think Myst is one of those examples where like that happens often and you're just really confused by most of the game. Have you turned on the underwater lights? Once you do that, you can explore the ship's hold. So that was the answer. Now, Transport Tycoon. Love Transport Tycoon. Again, one of my favorite like strategy games or management games, depending on how you want to categorize it. Sort of had a unique focus, and rather than like building a physical city, it focused on the actual transport and network of how you interlink them, and then your city would grow based on that. And really underrated game, I think. Can you tell me what effect building a statue of yourself has on the city it's in? Peter Bolton, Cheltenham, New South Wales. No effect whatsoever, apart from the ego trip. Of course, it's actually quite a waste of resources. Yeah. The Oracle. I'm stuck in big time in Zork Nemesis. How do you go about moving the levers to obtain air and empty the ball? Try to drag them, but they're stuck. Help. Sally Tuckerman, Regency Park, South Australia. Gabriel Knight 2 on Chapter 3. I can only hide the clock behind the plant. Why? Sylvia Saman, Parramatta, New South Wales. Duke 3D. What is the purpose of the tied-up ladies to tell you to kill them when you press the space bar near them? Con Panos, Orange, New South Wales. It's a little joke in honour of the movie Aliens. Serves no purpose whatsoever. Yep. Classic screenshots here. There's Zork Nemesis 3D. Some hardware setup help. Anything interesting? Commodore 386 SX20. I was wondering what I could do to make it able to play the latest games. Adrian Jones from Devonport, New Zealand. Alrighty, moving on to Flashback Zork. Here we go. Okay, so yeah, the first Zork was a text-based adventure. Classic box art there. Gotta love it. It's with a TRS-80 as well. West House. You are standing in an open field west of a white house with a boarded front door. There is a small mailbox here. With these immortal words, and without graphics or long convoluted multimedia events, the first Zork title mesmerized the gaming world in a witty text-based adventure into the bizarre and very humorous world of caverns, crawl spaces, killer trolls, annoying thieves, and misty moors that is Zork. Zork was created by Infocom Incorporated in 1979 by various computer scientists from MIT. It was not founded to sell Zork. Rather, it was founded to give group members somewhere to go from MIT. Originally written for a mainframe, the group determined that it would be possible to make Zork run on something cheaper than the $400,000 PDB-10, and the company eventually went along. Within the world of Zork, it was never really established why you were there or what you were meant to do. In the true sense of an adventure, you were just thrust right into it. Journeys into the great underground empire introduced you to a complete world where magic, mystery, danger, and death were behind every corner. Zork utilized an interface that, when released, shocked the world with its intricate understanding of complex sentences, but perhaps now it may shock the Nintendo generation for its lack of graphics. It still stands as a milestone of gameplay history. To interact with the world of Zork, an interface known as Parser was used. The role of the parser was to interpret commands from the user into actions that could be generated within the game. Of revolutionary note, within Zork was its impressive vocab. When told not to enter the dark because a guru will eat you, responding with describe guru would return a wealth of descriptive information to the player. Coupled with the most seemingly impossible puzzles and problems ever conceived in computer gaming history, Zork utilizes a scoring system that allowed players to constantly monitor their progress. Treasure could be collected to increase score, but could then be stolen by the thief. Zork was more than a computer game. It was an entire world with a history, geography, mythology, and an off-the-wall sense of humor of the ridiculous. It was filled with magic and monsters, but it also populated with some of the most eccentric characters and situations ever devised. It is no wonder the Zork series quickly amassed a loyal cult following, which still remains nearly 2 decades later. JL, very good write-up. Yeah, if regardless of if you've played this or not, it's really interesting that Zork and most of the other first sort of parser-style text-based adventures can actually really drag you in. I remember for a period in the early 90s, I got into like MUDs online, like multi-user dungeon script-based adventure games. And you just really, when you've got a lack of visual input, you're just really forced to use your imagination. And I know in a lot of the games you'd end up like physically drawing your own map of the world and like where to go and where not to go and where certain items lie. And it just really sort of dragged you into this world that existed inside this computer, which is, yeah, it doesn't, like, you know, it's easier to look at these days and go, where are the graphics? I think Zork is definitely one to go back and look at playing. As I said, I haven't played through it completely, but I have games of a similar sort of spec that emulated what Zork was about. And it's definitely enjoyable if you've got the time and you feel like using your imagination for once. So check it out. Reader's survey. Look, I've gone and added some info here. So look, I had a 14.4 modem back then. Final page here. Okay, there you go. I talked about prices of modems earlier. So we've got a 28K external modem for $400. So yeah, super pricey. Cost of trying to get on the internet in 1996. But yeah, that's pretty much it. In part 2 of this video, we are going to look at the CD-ROM and everything on it. So stay tuned for that. And thanks for watching, guys. Catch you next time.